Steve Pearman, I'm VP of Product for MySpace.
Wow. And what does that mean? Because we met the CEO now, and your job is to make happen what he tells you to? Or
Yeah,
what?
so Product Gang is basically responsible for all things user experience. So old features, new features, problems, tweakage. I mean, anything the user is going to touch, that's product.
Yeah. And tell me how development of a major site like this is changing. I imagine you do a lot of testing, a lot of A/B testing. You probably sneak a feature in on a few hundred people and see how they react and see if the usage goes up. Or
you'll see cool stuff get hidden all over MySpace. A lot of times they'll, when we test it, we'll do it range-based. So if you look at the users, they all have a user ID that's numerical and increments, increments, increments. So when we have something new to play with, we'll push it out to some range. Or if it's something we just want to get a larger feel for how a community uses it, we'll push it out to a country. So, lately we've been testing a lot with the Irish, because we can read things they don't like because it's in English. But, looking for small English-speaking countries to test things on has been one of our latest little tricks.
Yeah. And what are you learning from, we were talking before the camera started that many of the major websites in the world are very, very simple. You think of Craigslist or Google or MySpace or my blog. Very simple and in some ways even ugly, right? Tell me a little bit of what you've learned from doing that A/B testing, and what do people really respond to?
Well, it's funny. I mean, the biggest learning curve in MySpace has been you just kind of have to, it's a good way to put this, so you look at the numbers, right? And we're doing, I don't know, 100+ million global, something like 70 million domestic. I haven't looked at the...
Is that a month or?
A month.
Yeah.
So let's say, just talk about domestic, for instance. Let's say it's 70 million unique users a month on MySpace. So you have to be, kind of take yourself out of the idea of, I know what's best. Or I'm going to define the experience. Because even if I'm 90% right, there's 7 million people that are going to be totally disenfranchised or have what they want sort of stepped on. So we try real hard when we're building tools to build them as flexibly as possible and have an open experience. So, you define the experience. I mean, I don't know what's going to make you happy. I barely know what makes me happy. Here's a tool set. You use it in a way that's meaningful to you, and hopefully that satisfies sort of what your needs are. Yeah. So when we test things out, there's a lot of, part of it's learning for us to say, okay, here's a tool, how do people use it? Because they're going to, half the time it's in a way we've never expected, and that sort of bizarre implementation usually leads to the things that people like the best. So testing it that way, getting feedback. I mean, the nice part for us is when I push anything, everyone's friends with Tom, so they write him and tell him about it. So we're processing, thousands of inbound on anything we do.
That poor guy is so overworked across the hall.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Tom literally reads his mailbox. Like, he's in there all day. Yeah. So we got a pretty good beat on...
You wouldn't even let us do an interview with him. He was so busy.
No, he's going back to the mailbox. Like, he's literally... I mean, he is there all day getting the feedback. Yeah. So when we do...
We're joking, but it's serious.
I mean, it's literally what he's doing.
People don't believe us. We're going to take the camera over and show...
Yeah, he's literally in there all day. So, I mean, we have a real good beat on what, what's working, what's not, what do people want, what don't they like. And as long as you sort of have the discipline to say, okay, I'm going to cater to that rather than what I think is right, then you're not going to make these sort of mistakes that come out of a function of me thinking I'm smart. I mean, as a collective, the users are far smarter than anyone in this building, and if you just respect that, then eventually it plays out to a product that they dig.
That's interesting, because that's something I discovered as a blogger, that the audience makes me smarter. That's why we do cell phone videos a lot of times, which we can't do here in MySpace because the cell phones don't work here.
Oh, yeah, the towers out here are just ridiculously bad. I mean, it's, we were joking earlier, it's like we have a foil hat on the building to keep the CIA from stealing our thoughts. But, it's very much a function of if you listen to the users and, really take to heart what they say, you'll look smart.
How is doing that process different than when you guys were smaller and a small startup and you could fit in one corner of this room?
Yeah. Well, even in the early days, I mean, you take your best whack at it. And development at MySpace has always been very iterative. So it's, we'll take what we think is right with an absolute expectation that as soon as it launches, we're going to have to do V2. So you launch, your best guess based on, and most of the things we launch are things that users have come inbound and said they wanted. So you'll kick it out, you'll get mass feedback, and usually, the changes they want are very small. It's like, this feature sucks. It should have more blue, or these buttons should be over here. And if you respect that and you do those changes, usually the next iteration is very good. And it may not be what's classically considered, beautiful, say, but it's dictated by the users, so it's not really, at least my place to say it's wrong.
Yeah. Tell me where the openness came from, because one thing about MySpace that's real interesting is a lot of places where you don't think you could cut and paste code, you can actually cut and paste some code, and that's why you end up with these weird looking pages, right?
Yeah.
Weird is being nice, right?
Yeah.
You got CSS that's pulling stuff in and
everywhere.
linking and pulsing.
I'm going to screw with your shot here, but if I go to the whiteboard, I think in terms of whiteboard, so this will make more sense. Trade to shot besides it. The simplest way to explain it is, so when we think about the world, it's sort of from this perspective. So at the center of the universe, is the user. It's happy. And the user has sort of has like an innate need. And when you think about product, you have to kind of figure out what is it we're trying to solve. And at least from my perspective, what most users are really interested in is this desire to know and be known. It's like, I want you to understand me, and I want to understand you. It's kind of this notion of, I'm only really going to understand myself through you and vice versa. So, fundamentally, users want to know and be known. So the way we spec out what we're going to do next is this notion of descriptors and connectors. And it kind
Descriptors and connectors.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is all like the internal language. This is the first time we've talked about this, so
Okay.
if it sounds weird, bear with me.
All right.
So when we talk a descriptor connector, let's say this is profiles. That's the big descriptor. So this is me. Understand my profile to understand me. Here's, the books that are meaningful to me. This is the music that's meaningful to me.
In other words, it's me outbound. It's what I want you to know about me.
I'm projecting out to the world. Know me, understand me.
It's how I'm trying to describe myself to you.
And it's because fundamentally I want you to understand me. I think that's sort of a base human need. I want to be understood. And when we talk about community, that's sort of your first barrier you got to get over, is helping people understand each other. So profiles are pretty good at that. But part of you understanding me is I can't really dictate how you got to go about doing that, because you are a radically different person than everyone else, and if I try and make it too cookie cutter, it brings a level of homogeneity across the set. So,
which is nice in some contexts, right? A phone book should be nice and clean, so that you can go through hundreds of thousands of.
It depends on what your objective is. Yeah. If I'm looking for efficiency, then expression is counter to that. If I'm looking for expression, it eventually undermines efficiency to a large degree. Because as you see the disparity between people's expression, it's hard to set an expectation of, say, where things will live or how they will look or what content is present. And you just don't, those two are to a certain degree at odds, efficiency and expression. So, when we do the profiles, we said, okay, sky's the limit. Whatever you think's going to express you knock yourself out. You want to do blinky text on a, scarlet pink background that makes my eyes bleed, right on. It's not my place to say that's not right or that it's an atrocity to design. And some of them are atrocities to design, but if something in that resonates and says, me, this you look at that and you're going to get me, then right on. That's cool. So, I know it makes...
Where some of your competitors kick you off if you do stuff like that.
Yeah, and just because...
I know, I've been kicked off a social network or two if you look at Google and search on kicked off and Scoville.
But it's a function of, like, if that's what you're about, more power to you. Not my place to say who you got to be. So that's your descriptor side of things. On the connectors, you got things like mails, sort of once we're already connected, groups, the blogs. Blogs kind of fits in both camps, but it's a good connector. Where you've got features that are helping me know you or for us to find each other. So it's not just, here's me, it's, I want a new way to attach to the community. How do I find other people that I want to know or I want to know me. And it's interesting. I mean, when we started this, you look at the profile side of things, it just feels sort of at a, first blush level like narcissism. Like, totally understand the concept that people want to each stand on their mountaintops and scream like, I'm cool, I'm cool, I'm cool, I'm cool.
Bloggers all understand that, don't we?
but you guys are also a good proof of the other side of the model that this thing just doesn't work unless there's an appetite for that. Yeah. Like, people want, as much as somebody wants to stand on the mountain and scream, this is me, other people are like, that's cool, I want to understand you. So it's very much a reciprocal act. And it's something that, when I came onto the crew, I don't think I really had anticipated. I just assumed it was going to be so much shouting. But, it very quickly turns into conversation. So it's a really neat model to see play out in action. So, this is sort of your description.
There's only so much pink backgrounds.
Oh, but
the fun is then that, okay, I got a pink background. Oh, you got a pink background too.
It's like, oh, you got raining hearts, I got raining stars, and it's like you make a new friend. So, it's very much built to say, okay, this is me, and then these to help you branch out into new things. So like, I come to your profile, and your profile is cool. Okay, you're going to establish a level of credibility. I mean, this provides the context for all the rest of these. So like, let's say forums, right? Yeah. Here's where things get really cool. So if I'm doing forums, normally when I make a post in a forum and you read it, you got to make a content assumption based on that chunk of content. Like, I say, this is the coolest restaurant in West LA. Yeah. You go look and you're like, okay, let's make an assessment on that text. Yeah. You believe it or you don't. Maybe it's based on what I've written. Maybe it's based on other forum posts I've made. But you got to make a judgment on the credibility of that author. But if I can go to your profile and I can see you and what you're about, humans are real good at making content judgments on other humans. That forum's post now has a whole new context. I mean, something maybe as simple as, this is the best restaurant in West LA, but I go look and you're, 97 pounds and clearly emaciated and obviously a shut-in. Maybe this isn't a valid assessment. You're a deuce and a half and a well-fed boy. I'm going to take your word on what that restaurant is. So, at the most superficial level, but I come here and it's like, okay, this guy's into these kinds of things. He's into these sorts of bands. He's in these sorts of organizations. This is a guy who probably runs in similar circles to I do or has similar tastes. That content now takes on a new credibility that it just could never have as a standalone item. So, when you think about, this is sort of the model we take anything we're doing.
No, and that's different than some of the other social networks where you're looking at the friend network. For instance, upcoming.org, you can tell which events are really interesting based on the people who are attending that event, right? And
some of that, we do that as well, but it's, I think where things get interesting is...
And then I'm judged by the friends I keep, right? If I picked really good friends, then...
Totally, or I use those friends for grazing. So if you're interesting and I know you, I want to know your friends because it's a greater context for you. And the people if I'm into you, the people you're into, I'm probably going to be into too. Or the events you're into, I'm probably into too. So you use that as your connectors. But, the view of the world is very much a content creator-centric view of the world. It's whatever you want to do, so long as it doesn't, break something, is malicious, or mess with other users, you do whatever makes you happy. Rather than, you see some sites that are more geared towards a content consumer view of the world, where it's, I want to make this efficient for you as possible. We're very much at the other end of the spectrum saying, I want to make the content creator as liberated as possible in what they can and can't do. Yeah. So like when you look at the HTML and CSS, I mean, anything short of JavaScript, knock yourself out. It is, we want to give you want to cover my profile with something that, a full flash overlay, rock on. I'd much rather you do something that really satisfies whatever your needs are, rather than living up to some vision I have of how the world should work.
Yeah. Are you bringing video game strategy into this world? We just did an interview with Jason Calacanis, the CEO of Mahalo, totally. And he was studying the leveling behavior in World of Warcraft. And he says, I'm going to use that leveling behavior to help make my search engine better because as people don't, submit items to the search engine, the better they are, the higher up they'll go. You know, they'll become level 70ers in search terms,
Yeah,
right?
search paladin, basically.
Yeah.
Level,
And are you
level
gonna
7 ranger, yeah.
Are you gonna start bringing those kinds of gaming technologies?
You see some of it on the site today, and I think you'll probably see us go further down the road. But look at that's a good example. Take our comedy section, right? Comedy section is something really unusual we've done that you just don't see elsewhere. So we had music, and comedy was born out of, we're looking at our music charts going, why is Dane Cook one of our top musical acts? And you had comedians didn't have a home or a tool set on the web, so they were appropriating our music section. So again, you know, users sort of driving the product roadmap. So we spun out a comedy section. In the comedy section, there's a blend of metrics that actually allow them to chart. So, you know, you very much have a quantitative assessment of something that's qualitative of who's funny, coming out into a ranking set, effectively, of this is the third funniest guy on MySpace. So we have some of that for the artist types,
Yeah.
and then in some.
But if somebody's really good at ranking, you know, and somebody keeps finding you the funniest comics before anybody else does, and they're very accurate, do they get more power in the system?
What you see is more users gravitate towards them. So these are sort of your tastemakers on the site. So let's say, and at very micro level. So, you know, out of my 100+ friends, if one of them is very good at, say, picking out these kinds of things, or writes these awesome blogs, or using our post this function to get cool stories in, he becomes one of my hubs. So effectively, you've got users programming for other users, and to the extent that I like him, he makes my top 8. Now all of a sudden, my friends see him as a highlighted user that's close to me, and they're checking it out as well. So most of that sort of action is actually done with users filtering for what they like, and then using that to expose to the users. Sort of like in our video section, favoriting is a very big thing, especially lately, that publishes to your friend updates. So when I favorite a video, I see in the ripple effect these days where I really liked, what was a good one? Dramatic Lemur. If you haven't seen Dramatic Lemur, you all need to go look at Dramatic Lemur. Mm-hmm. I favorited Dramatic Lemur. Next thing you know, my friend updates is full of other my friends favoriting Dramatic Lemur. So it's, you know, I become the programmer out rather than sort of the central source saying what's cool down to the user base. Because if we pick, you know, like I say, if I'm 90% right, there's millions and millions of people that think I'm an idiot. So, you know, I'll build a framework, I'll build a tool set. You as a user, you define what's important to you. And that's probably what's going to be important to your friends, or they probably wouldn't be your friends.
Yeah. What's the craziest thing you've seen somebody do with your platform?
Oh, geez.
Do you have a wall of shame where people post up, you know, this is the craziest thing?
I got a picture there of a guy that apparently spent like 9 hours on MS Paint drawing Catherine McPhee, and then put a blog up about it. And for some reason that blog blew up, where people just like couldn't believe that he spent 9 hours drawing Catherine McPhee. Like, it is just, it's weird, but it's the sort of thing where somebody's odd behavior like that actually catches on and for some reason tickles the imagination of the rest of the user base. So, you know, we see a lot of that where somebody just does something so outlandish, or just, maybe not even outlandish, just something that is very much about them, and that just resonates with people. I mean, it's so honest. And
the dancing trend is a good example.
Oh, yeah, the people out, which ones? The DDR stuff was great.
Which ones?
No, Dance Dance Revolution. Yeah. Our Dance Dance Revolution videos were just nuts for a while. We had a bunch of ASCII art was a big phenomenon for a while. Yeah. People
that keeps coming back.
Well, and
that started in the 70s, you know, when or in the 80s, you know, when on Apple IIs we didn't have much of a graphics processor, right? We had the ability to draw text characters on screen.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you look at some of the early video games, it was mainly pushing text characters around the screen.
Great. I cannot take eFlask. You know, those are the best. But we see a lot of them where, you know, oddly in our comments you can put HTML in them. You know, put an image, put a video, and people still seem to be hooked on ASCII art. So you see these weird behavior trends, and usually it's one user does it, and then somebody else sees it and like, oh, that's awesome. And you just watch it ripple out through the bloodstream. I mean, the viral effect through MySpace is just ridiculous. I mean, when YouTube was at a point where we had never heard of YouTube, users were just rippling videos out through the system. So, you know, it's very cool when we get into the open social platform and our developer platform are coming out. You know, I think we're going to see the same thing with applications where cool stuff ripples. And as long as you can avoid things getting spammy and scammy, you're going to see just these, hopefully, just excellent things that we would never think of ripple out and be really meaningful to the user base. So it's very cool.
When you're with your team, how do you brainstorm? How do you come up with new ideas? How do you react to competitive pressures? Like, I'm doing these little cell phone live videos. When are you guys going to do that?
Well, a lot of it's technology based, and we usually take our directive out from the user base. So spend a lot of time looking at the inbound. Spend a lot of time just watching the community. Watching the forums, watching the groups, seeing what's on the rise and fall, because it's a pretty good indicator of, left to their own devices, people will do what they want to do, and they'll do it with or without you. They'll find a way. So if you can watch that and sort of harness the observational element on it, then you can say, okay, there's obviously a latent demand for this. What's the best way we can service that? And that's a lot of what we do. And some of it you got to look beyond it because the users just haven't thought about wanting it yet. But there's so much to be done. Just you harness a few 100 million people together. Turns out they got some pretty good stuff cooking.
Cool. Anything else in the last minute we should know about your job or what you're trying to do?
This is the most fun job I ever had.
Well, thank you very much.
Totally.
Thanks.